This is the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We now know that committee is taking an aggressive approach to its investigations. Today, that committee's chairman, Congressman Benny Thompson, who you see here, he's also the head of the Homeland Security Committee. Today, he sent out sprawling demands for documents and communications to all these different agencies, demands that are impressive in their scope. For example, from the National Archives, they are demanding Trump White House records and communications of basically anything and everything that happened on January 6th, the day of the Capitol attack. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, one of the two Republicans on this committee, had previewed that the committee should try to obtain records from the White House about every communication, every movement of any principal in the White House on the day of January 6th. They are indeed doing that. But they're also demanding records, not just from January 6th, but for days, weeks, and in some cases months leading up to it about, quote, planning by the White House and others for legal or other strategies to delay, halt, or otherwise impede the electoral count. That's, for example, where the Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani communications come in. They want any documents and communications relating to instructions to stop or delay preparation for the transition of administrations. They wanted information about whether the Trump administration was trying to essentially stop or block the transition to the Biden administration. They want, quote, communications discussing the recognition of Joseph Biden as the winner of the 2020 presidential election. They want all documents and communications concerning the potential invocation of the Insurrection Act. From the date of the election, November 3rd, until the day before the inauguration, January 20th, they want all documents and communications related to martial law, all documents and communications concerning the use of federal law enforcement or military personnel during voting in the 2020 presidential election. I mean, the stuff that they are looking for here is breathtaking. They're looking at the whole picture of Trump trying to use the powers of his office to stay in the presidency after losing the election. But that's just a portion of what they're asking for in terms of White House records. Look at what they want from the Pentagon. Again, and this is just a sliver of it. All documents and communications related to instructions to stop or delay the administration of activities to prepare for the transition of administrations. Did he try to rope the Pentagon into that kind of planning? All documents and communications related to the potential use of military power to impede or ensure the peaceful transition of power between the time of the election up through and including the inauguration of President Biden. All documents and communications concerning possible attempts by President Trump to remain in office after January 20th, 2021. From Election Day, November 3rd, to January 20th, all documents and communications related to the possibility of invoking the Insurrection Act, including but not limited to documents and communications concerning that possibility with respect to preparation for the events of January 6th. All documents and communications on January 6th relating to the deployment of law enforcement personnel or military assets to the U.S. Capitol. They're asking the Pentagon, as of today, for all documents and communications relating to the initial denial by Pentagon officials that Lieutenant General Charles Flynn, Mike Flynn's brother, participated in meetings on January 6th related to the response to the attack. On January 6th, as Mike Flynn had stoked crowds, right, had stoked Trump supporters into believing that they could do something on January 6th that would stop Biden from becoming president and would keep Trump in office, his brother, Charles Flynn, was part of Pentagon discussions that day as to whether or not overrun Capitol Police and D.C. police at the U.S. Capitol would get backup. And those hours and hours and hours of delay, during which 140 police officers were injured. Those hours and hours and hours of delay, which ultimately proved fatal. Those hours and hours and hours of delay remain unexplained. And it remains unexplained why the Pentagon initially denied, absolutely lied, denied that Charlie Flynn had anything to do with those discussions when, in fact, he did. Finally, somebody is trying to get to the bottom of that. And I mean, actually, those were just slivers of the requests about Trump White House records and the Pentagon. And that's just 2 of the 8 agencies who are fielding these kinds of requests as of today. That's not even counting, for example, the request to the Justice Department about Trump trying to enlist Justice Department officials to overturn the election results in specific states. And ultimately, what they were trying for was overall. So these demands for communications and documents have gone out as of today. And they have gone out like a carpet bombing effort. The anxiety in Trump world and in the Republican Party about there being a real investigation of January 6th, including the actual expectation by those mobs who attacked the Capitol that somehow Trump was going to end up staying president if they just played their part right. That anxiety about there being a real investigation and real efforts to keep Trump in power, despite the fact that he lost the election, their anxiety about that actually being investigated thoroughly was probably warranted anxiety. It was warranted if the former president did try to use the powers of his office to break our democracy and seize power by force. That's something that isn't just, a record we're going to need for the history books. It's something we need to know now, particularly in terms of who helped him and how they did so.